Gotham Knights is a third-person RPG exclusive to the current generation of consoles. They're released for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC on the 21st of October 2022. The decision to cut out the previous generation of consoles pairs well with a game that decided to cut out Gotham City's most iconic hero, Batman, and instead turn the reins over to a foursome that could generously be called his apprentices. Both decisions are risky, as removing the biggest character anchor from this world and cutting off a large portion of any potential playerbase are not decisions to be made lightly. Batgirl, Nightwing, Redhood and Robin take centre stage as they are left to pick up the pieces in the wake of Batman's death. Predictably, the criminal element of Gotham City is spurred on by his absence, forcing our cast of understudies to rise up from their supporting roles and into the thick of the action. This story begins when the Bat himself sacrifices his life and lair to take down Ra's al Ghul. From there, the likes of Barbara, Tim, Dick and Jason move into the Belfry and continue Bruce's investigation into a doctor. The main plot focuses on the unmasking of a criminal organisation called the Court of Owls, who have seemingly run Gotham City in a very Illuminati-esque way for centuries. This plot hits genre stereotypes hard, and you know who the court's main antagonist is the moment they appear on screen. The twist that happens just before the final showdown is very predictable too, so if you're looking for an intriguing story, this really isn't it. What story content stands out are the side plots featuring Gotham's other well-known villains. These all have plans the Knights need to stop, and feature most of this game's best level design, encounter design, and cinematic moments. These quests exist outside of the main plot path other than their introductions, so you can progress them at your own pace, or avoid them entirely should you wish. What matters a great deal for a game set in a universe that has lost its primary character is how the new characters fill that role, and I don't mean strictly as the protector of Gotham. No matter who you choose to play as, the dialogue and presentation do their best to make you feel like your chosen character is slightly more than a quarter of the cast. Every level you gain is also shared with the other three characters, so you can switch between them as you please. I played almost the entire game as Tim Drake, Robin, yet Batgirl, Red Hood and Nightwing were all the same level at the end. While the message of each story element doesn't change significantly depending on which character you choose, there are some dialogue changes and some unique moments of reflection for each protagonist as you progress the game, so there is some merit in picking your favourite and sticking with it. As you might expect, Gotham Knights is set in Gotham City, a large open world that feels a lot like the cities of Marvel's Spider-Man, The Division 2 and Watch Dogs. If you've played the Batman Arkham games, there's some obvious similarities, but if you're coming into this with no Arkham experience, this is ultimately another generic AAA open world game set in a sprawling urban environment. You're given a grappling hook and a bat cycle to get around on, and you can unlock unique traversal skills later on in the game. During the day, our heroes hang out at the Belfry, argue over their plans to save Gotham, and are wrangled by Alfred, who is by far the best written and voiced character in the game. At night, you are unleashed into the open world and tasked with tracking down criminals, saving the citizenry, collecting collectibles, and progressing the plot. Most of the activities you'll be engaging in involve taking down petty criminals committing street offences and gathering evidence until a serious crime pops up. Most of these feel very inorganic, but are quick to deal with. Some of the more serious crimes see you infiltrate buildings, stomp bank robbers, and rescue hostages. None of these ever feel unique. They all just feel like a checklist of bad guys to punch. You end up going to locations you've been to before and replaying the same activities quite often. The entire gameplay cycle is collecting intel one night, then clearing those activities the next. This continues right up to and including the endgame, so be prepared for a bit of fatigue on this front. In short, a lot of these open world activities are just that, open world activities. They're just counting stats, waiting for you to hit arbitrary goals and unlock the real mission. I wasn't expecting Gotham Knights to rewrite the book on open world games, but this does feel very cookie cutter. This game's progression feels similarly generic. You have a leveling system where you get XP for doing activities and get more powerful. You find schematics and crafting parts and enemies and use these to make better weapons and armor. There are only 3 equipment slots on each character, melee weapon, range weapon and suit, making this quite a limited RPG system that is augmented by mods. These have rarity and give you bonus stats like elemental damage, but don't fundamentally alter your skills or playstyle beyond raw numbers. This system is frankly quite basic. There are cosmetic differences to suits and weapons, however, and a transmog system on launch, which was a nice surprise, and I really do appreciate this being included, even if it's already an avenue for monetization. The level cap on your first playthrough is 30, and then when you enter New Game Plus, the cap is bumped up to 40. Doing this resets all your story progress, but lets you keep your weapons and gear. Your first playthrough will take between 25 and 30 hours. The second game run will take you up to about 40, and it took me about 45 hours to get the perfect game. Other form of progression outside of loot and leveling comes in the form of skill trees for each character. There are 4 per hero, usually divided into their areas of specialty. Each character has their own playstyle, but there's not just one way to play them. These abilities are all valuable depending on your chosen hero, but I consider these trees to be quite shallow. I wasn't expecting to see World of Warcraft's talent trees or Borderlands skill trees, but there's not really a lot of meat here for each character. For an RPG style game, this is really light on the skills, stats, and gear factor that you usually find within this genre. In short, Batgirl is a single target brawler, Redhood is a range specialist, Nightwing is a good all-rounder with a focus on support and high mobility, while Robin specializes in stealth and elemental damage. Each character has melee and ranged attacks and special abilities via a momentum gauge, but a lot of the time, encounters just see you hammering the same combo over and over again to chip away at some of these enemies that do have crazy health bars. There's a particular mission in Harley's questline where you fight more than 3 big bruiser type mini-bosses in a row. This is literally just a battle against your own fatigue and concentration as you try and chip these health bars down. While none of these fights are truly awful, this entire system lacks the depth of a true looter to counteract spongy bosses with OP builds and loot, or the combat depth of a true spectacle fighter to allow player skill to be the defining factor. Combat here is caught somewhere in the middle of both concepts and never really fulfills the promise of each one. In terms of the spectacle of combat and missions, the villain arcs with Harley, Clayface and Mr. Freeze are all brilliant. The fights themselves are nice to look at and be part of, but no matter which character or what gear you go in with, you do feel like you're fighting a wall. Chipping off health is a generous description of what's happening here, and even with powerful gear equipped, you don't feel like you're doing a lot of damage. Now, some of these encounters are better suited to certain characters. However, this is mostly down to the fact that Red Hood's ranged attacks are so powerful that you can kite enemies and do good damage. I don't know if these encounters were scaled with co-op in mind, but for a game that is playable solo, if they are, there needs to be 2 different sets of health bars. Some regular enemies fall into this same trap, but they tend to be more frustrating to fight than truly difficult. The regulator drone users would top my list by a country mile, as they are difficult to hit with melee attacks, can dodge ranged attacks, and control drones independently of themselves, which can attack you from all angles. Fighting these as a melee character is particularly annoying, as you are dancing around often a crowded battlefield trying to find a window to knock them down and do some damage. The non-human Owls enemies and the League's regular soldiers are also annoying as hell to fight. Combat can therefore end up being a real mess, and even on the game's standard difficulty, lots of fights end up being a frantic mash of you doing everything possible just to not get hit, while struggling to find a window to return fire. There's a lot going on in these encounters, and you can find yourself caught in sequential attacks with nothing to do but absorb the damage. As I address this game's technical state, let me acknowledge that I am playing this on a PC that has significantly more powerful hardware than both the PS5 and the Xbox Series. Both of those consoles are locked to 30 FPS, and this was a key factor in my decision to purchase the PC version of this title. To put it bluntly, this game ran very, very poorly. I experienced frequent hits to my 99th percentile FPS that made this game a stuttering mess regardless of what resolution I chose. This was predominantly during traversal, but also occurred during cutscenes. 60 FPS is very important in this game because it has action combat. Were this a turn-based JRPG or a slower paced title like XCOM or Stardew Valley, 30 FPS would not be an issue. Here, 60 absolutely needs to be that baseline. I mentioned earlier on how frantic combat was. Imagine trying to react and dodge in time if this was running in 30 FPS. I also counted a few crashes and freezes and other hops and stutters in performance. I don't recall any major visual bugs, and for the most part, the quests and mission progress worked as expected. I don't have too many gripes about the state of this game outside of overall performance. With all the settings maxed out in 4K, this game looks good rather than great. There are a lot of haze effects and dimly lit areas that try to create an atmosphere, but I can't say that this is on the same level of detail as even a last-gen title like Red Dead Redemption 2. Character models for the main cast are good but not special, and some weather effects don't stand out amid the constant night. The best visual treat this game offers is actually the game opening shot of Bruce Wayne's face, where you can pick out individual lines and age marks. No other character model comes anywhere close to that. Gotham Knights ends up being its own contradiction. For a game that had to run at 30 FPS on consoles and abandon the previous generation entirely, I expected a lot better. This should have been something that made you proud to own one of those consoles, or a PC that could actually run this. Yet I can't point to a single element within this game that justifies these decisions from a gameplay perspective. I can't stress enough that the hardware demands are staggeringly out of touch with the setup of your average player for 1080p gaming, and the lack of a performance mode on consoles is a joke, particularly as the console version of this game is more expensive than the PC version. This game's closest facsimile that already exists is the Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales games, with co-op the only meaningful addition here. I do think that this game will have its fans once the performance issues are ironed out though. This isn't markedly different from Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, so if you like those games and the gameplay they bring, you're probably going to like this. For me, Gotham Knights is exactly what gamers would expect from a AAA game 3 years ago, and would have made a good addition to the rosters of both the PS4 and Xbox One. However, when placed in the context of the current generation of consoles, this is just a generic box-checking open-world adventure that came out a few months too early.